NATO shocked everyone today by admitting that the alliance would need 45 days just to move troops to the eastern flank to defend the territory in case of a Russian attack on European countries. During this time, Russia could fully occupy the Baltic countries and reach Poland's borders. Statements like this were surprising 4 years ago, but now they're shocking, since NATO apparently hasn't learned from Russia's large-scale war against Ukraine. And the whole problem is that NATO still hasn't made any regulatory decisions allowing, for example, the rapid redeployment of troops from, say, Germany to Poland, so that this wouldn't be perceived as an act of aggression. Besides, the Europeans still haven't started fixing the logistics, since there are still railway tracks of different gauges. Within the European Union, there are bridges not designed for transporting heavy equipment and tunnels where tanks simply don't fit. Well, and in some countries, it's legally prohibited to transport heavy equipment on public roads. But fortunately, the European Union has developed a plan according to which Europe will address all these issues, so that moving troops from Western Europe to Eastern Europe will take a maximum of 3 days. But how they plan to achieve this is what we're going to talk about. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic in detail together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave any comment under this episode, and also subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. And if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. So, today the Financial Times comes out with a very loud article titled "The Surreal 45-Day March into the Heart of NATO's Defenses." The article begins with the recollections of American General Ben Hodges, who was leading military exercises in Europe when an unexpected incident occurred at a Polish railway station. Next is a quote, "When dozens of Bradley infantry fighting vehicles thundered past. Some of them had their gun turrets torn off by the roof of the railway platform. Fortunately, no one was hurt," said Hodges, who at the time was the commander of the United States Armed Forces in Europe and has since retired. "But the damage amounted to thousands of dollars and 10 vehicles were not ready for combat for a long time." And that was a very telling moment. In Europe, there are a lot of train stations like that which are clearly not designed for the rapid transfer of heavy equipment. 10 years later, as the Financial Times writes, crumbling bridges, different railway gauges, and a tangled bureaucratic situation still remain serious obstacles to moving military forces and equipment across Europe. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, France was unable to send tanks to Romania by the shortest land route through Germany and was forced to transport them across the Mediterranean Sea. In other words, the French had to send them all the way around Europe for one simple reason: bureaucracy. German laws did not allow the transportation of heavy military equipment through their territory, even if it was for NATO allies, and France was unable to send the tanks by land, even though they strongly requested it from the Germans. I'll explain what happened later. This example serves as a harsh reminder that the arms race in Europe is not limited to purchasing weapons or creating large armies. It's also necessary to ensure rapid transfer of troops, equipment, and ammunition from the West, where most NATO forces are based, to the alliance's eastern flank. Currently, transferring an army from strategic ports in the West to countries bordering Russia or Ukraine takes about 45 days. That's what European Union representatives calculated as they prepared to publish a new proposal on military mobility on Wednesday. They aim to cut this time to 5 or even 3 days. Alexander Zollfank, a German lieutenant general responsible for preparing his country for a central role in such an operation, stated that every element must work like clockwork. According to him, the goal is to send Moscow a powerful signal of deterrence. Here is his quote, "We know what you are planning and we are ready. Look, we are here." However, according to military officials, before NATO troops begin to move across the continent, the first problem will be the political recognition of the impending crisis. In the months leading up to the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Russia concentrated troops and weapons all along the Ukrainian border. Some Western officials and leaders were skeptical that the dictator Vladimir Putin would give the order to invade. They didn't believe it, saying, "No way, that can't be." Next, I'll quote Ben Hodges. How quickly can we determine what they're going to do? Then, the speed of decision making becomes important. Decisions tell us that we need to mobilize to take ammunition out of storage. Time is passing and we need to do something before the Russians attack. European leaders will also need to reach an agreement with the President of the United States on the nature of the threat and an adequate NATO response. Donald Trump's unstable position regarding Russia has caused concern in Europe about the extent of American involvement. But Washington has stated that it remains committed to the alliance and its mutual defense clause. As soon as NATO time is received, the transfer of troops and equipment to the east will begin. But when it will be received remains an open question. The exact number of flights planned for various scenarios is kept secret, as are their routes. However, NATO diplomats stated that analysts estimate the transfer from the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom through continental Europe to be about 200,000 military personnel, around 1,500 tanks, and more than 2,000 armored vehicles. Time is passing, and something needs to be done. Time is passing, and action needs to be taken, and something needs to be done. Time is passing, and something needs to be done. Time is passing, and action needs to be taken. Time is passing, and something needs to be done. Time is passing more, time is passing more, time is passing practice, time is passing more practice. The Association of the Railway Industry stated that Europe is only beginning to get a full understanding of the problems. He says that it is necessary to check which tunnels in Europe are actually suitable for transporting military equipment. The standard gauge of the European Union, that is, the maximum size of freight trains that allows them to safely pass under bridges and through tunnels, is too narrow for military transport. The slope of the tracks can also become a big problem. That is, the entire railway network in Europe is designed for civilian trains and may not be able to handle the transportation of heavy equipment. To solve the problem of incompatible railway track widths, in the Baltic countries, Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia are implementing a project worth 24 billion euros to integrate these countries into the European railway network. So the Rail Baltica project was designed with military movements in mind, and it is ready to transport oversized cargo. That means it's built into the foundation from the start, while in the rest of Europe it wasn't included. They decided freight trains would run, which they thought was enough, but now only the Baltic countries are working on this. What about the others? The transfer of military assets from Spain and Portugal will face similar difficulties, since the Iberian Peninsula also operates by different standards than the rest of the continent. Significant work also needs to be done on the road network, especially in Germany, whose geographical location and role as the stationing site for 37,000 American servicemen make it a central part of this plan. Here the Financial Times gives an example. Last year, a 100-meter section of the Karl Bridge in Dresden collapsed, becoming a symbol of the country's dire road conditions. And here we return again to the story when France tried to send tanks to Romania through Germany. The delivery of French Leclerc tanks to Romania in 2022 took several weeks instead of days because German customs rejected them due to their excessive weight for transportation on the roads. Instead, the Leclerc tanks were delivered from the port of Marseille to Alexandroupolis in Greece and then by rail to Romania. The Germans simply stated that our autobahns can't handle that weight, so sorry, war is war, but don't transport your tanks on our roads. The European Union report says member states have identified about 2,800 urgent problem areas in transport infrastructure needing modernization. But officials in Brussels reduced this list to 500 priority projects. NATO countries, except for Spain, agreed in June, let me remind you, to increase defense spending to 5% of gross domestic product per year by 2035, of which 1.5% can be spent specifically on infrastructure. In Germany, representatives of the Defense Ministry are lobbying for vital routes to be given priority under a 500 billion euro plan to modernize highways, bridges and railways. That's what Friedrich Merz managed to secure. But one of the oddities of moving troops to NATO's eastern flank is that they will have to cross countries that are not at war. And that means that army commanders will have to comply with customs regulations and labor laws. legislation that determines how long a truck driver can spend on the road and how much time he must rest. Even these bureaucratic aspects haven't been addressed or revised by anyone yet. And now European Union officials are working on the so-called military Schengen, which at least standardizes the scattered rules regulating the movement of armies. Last year, Germany, Poland and the Netherlands signed an agreement, by the way, to simplify cross-border military transport between themselves. In simple terms, it is now possible to quickly send troops from Germany to Poland, and they will pass through very quickly without any delays. Although, I personally remember discussing this topic with a member of the European Parliament back in 2022, and only now have some finally found a solution. In an effort to speed up government modernization, they are turning to the private sector. This year, the German armed forces signed a contract worth 260 million euros with the service division of Rheinmetall to support convoys passing through Germany. This means giving them everything needed: beds, dining, tank maintenance and more on site. The Bundeswehr also has an agreement with the freight division of the state railway service, Deutsche Bahn. But that's what Germany does. Whether other countries do this is a big question. The problem is that while the European Union appears united, standards and laws still differ everywhere and haven't been standardized. So that a hypothetical tank from France could calmly pass through Germany and head to Romania, and so that it wouldn't have to go by sea around all of Europe to be delivered to Romania, which is very strange because in Germany, by law, it simply wasn't allowed to drive a tank on the roads. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.